just so everyone knows. Live, just so everyone knows. I just put the link in the chat for the YouTube video because I guess the link that we were sent before isn't working, so that's good.
All right, Jay, you just let us know when everything's set up and we can start.
Vic, do you guys want to wait for Janice, or do you want to get started? I didn't hear what you said.
We can go ahead and get started.
Okay.
All right.
Let me just send the link out and then.
Okay. You tell me when, Jay.
Go ahead, Chico.
All right. So it is off to a bad start already. Sorry. All right. It's officially 3:07, and we are starting on the 23rd, 2020 Meet and Confer. So let's just quickly go through our agenda, what we're going to cover. It'll be the introductions. It'll be number 1. Number 2 will be the updates about McKeesa and Prop 301, if there are some from Vic, and district's counter proposal to our 6% raise, which we made on 2/25. So I will go ahead and get started. My name is Carlos Chico Robinson. I teach over at Kenilworth 7th and 8th Middle School.
My name's Jay Barbuto. I teach 7th and 8th grade language arts at Edison.
I'm Julie Robbins. I'm the social worker at Garfield.
I'm Nicole Goodwin. I teach 1st grade at Whittier.
I was on mute as usual, but I'm Marnie Burris, 3rd grade teacher at Lowell.
Dana Ramos, IES at Emerson.
Liz Lavis, Arizona Education Association.
Zephy Magana, principal at Hurd.
I'll go Mr. Anthony, still principal at Kenilworth School. Go Bills.
Shelman Brown, Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
I'm Vic Diaz. I'm the Director of Human Resources. I just got a text message from Dirk Olmsted. He says he's having technical difficulties, but he is the principal at Capital Elementary School.
All right, I believe that was everybody. So let's quickly move to agenda item number 2, which is updates about McKeesa and Prop 301. Dr. Diaz.
Great. Let's start with the teacher evaluation, and then we can move into Prop 301 from there. So as we shared in our last meeting, we need to redo our professional development plan for Prop 301. I did speak with our legal counsel about this, and we do have several options. In terms of the painless, or most painless, I should say, less hoopsy jumpsy, I think is the term that we use. Her recommendation is that we take a look at the PD plan as it is, and we do something in the bounds of that. And so when we talked about the idea of there was, 5 out of 7 of these meetings and 3 out of 4, her recommendation is that we look at doing something like at the date of the closures, which of those things had you had finished? And then for us to take that partial credit and to use that to justify you were on path to finish these hours. And so therefore, here's your cut of the professional development. That being said, there might be some teachers who were not on path for that. Let's say you had been on leave for the better part of the 2 months prior, so you missed a couple of those meetings. With that principal, then what that person could do is to come up with an alternate plan, which was in the old 301 plan. And in that alternate plan, simply say, well, these are the things I'm doing instead. As I share that, I'm very mindful that right now our teachers are going above and beyond when it comes to professional development. You've learned technology and new interfaces, and communication with families is something that we're doing on a level as a district that we probably haven't done before. And so we want to give credit for those things. So what I would foresee is that those educators would be able to work with their principal to say, my learning of things like Google Classroom, Zoom, distance learning also are all examples of my professional development. At the end of the day, what we'd probably want to do then is create a form on the front end that a teacher could complete and a principal could sign off on. I would imagine that that form could take a teacher 10 minutes to complete. It would take a principal longer than that to review it because we want to make sure that the principals are doing that. And then from there, we would have the documentation in place to show that professional development was happening, and that would unlock the 301 funds. Her recommendation for doing this comes out of a little space of trying to be careful. Many districts, I was on a call this morning with several HR professionals, knowing what had happened the last time we did school closures, that we had a lot of eyes looking into how money was distributed at the district during that closure time. We want to make sure that we're justifying everything when it comes to compensation. And so that's why her recommendation would be to do it in the way that I just described. I think there's some details that could be hammered out from that, but I spoke with the principals this morning about that plan. It seems like something that we could put in place relatively quick. Have teachers vote on it, have it approved by the governing board on their meeting on either I believe May 7th or May 6th has been set up as a meeting now too. So that would only buy us even more time.
I have one clarifying question, Vic. Can you just clarify for me? So that plan's for everyone, or that plan is for only the folks that have had one eval this year?
This is just in reference to Prop 301 professional development, not the teacher evaluation.
I'm so sorry. That's my bad. Okay, got it.
Hey, Vic, I have a question. For those teachers on leave to come up with an alternative plan, what type of an alternative plan? Could one of those alternative plans be, I learned how to do Google Classroom? Or would they have to do a certain amount of hours of PD, like the free online ones that are offered? Or could it be choose one of those?
Good question. There'd be a lot of discretion between the principal and the educator to make the plan that makes sense for that educator. And I think for some educators, they would say, look, I've spent these weeks learning Google Classroom and using it to communicate with families. Does that count? I think all 14 principals would say absolutely. And that would then go into the plan. If for some reason, we have a person who didn't go to DCTMs or PLCs and didn't go to parent-teacher conferences and also has not set up a Google Classroom or taken those steps they were supposed to, then we would have to look into another thing that they could do. It could be the learning library through Makisa. It could be Safe Schools trainings. It could be a book study. I don't think there'd be many people in that boat, though. I think between what people did before spring break and what people have done over the past 4 weeks, there would be sufficient evidence of professional development.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question? Who's responsible for, I guess, checking? So is it the building administration would be responsible for checking the requirements and making sure the requirements were met, regardless of if it's an alternative plan or if it's the original plan?
Yeah, the building administrator would be the person that would be signing off on that. I think especially over the past 6 weeks, our administrators are also really good right now at tracking time and effort in many ways with things like your Google Classroom, your Zoom meetings, things of that nature. So even for principals, I don't think that this would be an overly time consuming thing. It's almost just like kind of capturing, here's what I have. And saying, yeah, and again, far and away, I cannot think of a team who would not clear a bar of saying, you substantially developed as a professional this year.
I have one more question, Vic. What are we doing, or I guess not you, what are we doing to ensure that all the principals are having the same expectations for their staff? Because as you've seen, there has been site by site inequities throughout all of this, and which is understandable. But still, what are we doing to ensure that, you know, a teacher at Edison isn't being held to a different standard than a teacher at Kenilworth? I'm just calling Anthony out because I see his picture right there. It's not, that wasn't anything personal, but just curious.
Yeah, I think there's a variety of things that we can do. And I'll again say that there are some silver linings in this time. One of them, I think, is that our schools have developed a level of consistency that wasn't in place prior to the school closures out of necessity. We have to be on the same page with one another because we're all in this together and we're in this as a community. And so I think there's a lot more consistency now than there might have been a few weeks ago. One of the ways we've been pressing that consistency, the principals and all leaders are participating in leadership team meetings twice a week. Before that meeting was happening, maybe twice a month, sometimes once a month. So we would take time during one of those meetings to norm on expectations, make sure that no administrator is thinking they have to be more punitive or do things at a level of rigor that just isn't worth the time. You know, the two words that I hear most in leadership team meeting is grace and generosity. And I think those are the two things that would guide us in not necessarily forming this plan. I think that the plan is full of powerful professional learning, but in terms of those forms and signing off on that and getting those payments, that those are the two things that would guide us, lending a lot of grace to people and also just a lot of generosity. Again, I also don't necessarily think that we need to do that because our teachers by far and away have risen to this occasion, and those are very strong determinations of professional learning. We just need to make sure we have that documentation of it so that we can substantiate to anybody who ever asks, no, our teachers did powerful learning. Our teachers did amazing things during that time. They deserve every one of those pennies and more.
Thanks for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
Can I just add on to that? That just in general, I know we've had conversations throughout the year about differentiating PD and differentiating expectations for teachers based on where they are. And so I think Vic is onto something with the here's a form that everybody completes so that there's still the same accountability documentation piece, but that we also have a really good opportunity here to maybe explore a little bit and see when we have principals and teachers work together to try and come up with those plans, giving them those bigger picture guidelines, but seeing what direction that takes for the teachers who need it, because maybe that can give us some ideas for how we might be able to roll out some PD options in the future. So all that to say, I don't want to go too strict or too, everyone must have exactly this many hours, because I think there's a lot of potential learning we could take away from this as a model.
And just for those watching at home, that was Prop 301 that we were discussing, and we're going to move on to the PECTA.
Chico, if you, yes. I'm sorry, could just to make sure that I understand. So at this point, do we need to agree to what Vic said in order for it to be pushed to the governing board? Like, does that have to happen at this table? Virtual table before he can take it to the board for us to say, yes, PECTA agrees with the idea of taking what's originally there, and then as the alternative for anyone who's not on PATH, who wasn't on PATH before the closure, needs to submit an alternative plan or work in collaboration with their principal to develop an alternative plan under which their principal will approve. Does that, I'm just asking, I guess, for the, so we know if we have to like say yes.
Good question. Yes. The next steps of this would consist of the following things. I think what this group has to do is to come up with a general, we got to come up with a plan. And then that plan will go to teachers for a vote. We would need a 70% approval, and then it would go to the governing board. So what I'd like to propose, as teachers, you all know your craft best. You know how you're spending your time, and we want to give you credit for those things. If you all were able to come up with the form and have that ready to share, let's say Monday at 3:30, we could finalize it at our next meeting, take it to teachers at the end of our next meeting. On the other, or while you're doing that, we'll work on the back end systems in terms of our training with principals and with building leaders, our payroll systems. Because one of the things I did share is we're going to have a very tight payroll timeline on this to make sure that those payments can come in before balance of contracts. And so if in general we agree with this enough, I would say come up with a form, I'll come up with the back end, we'll meet on Thursday next week. And if we come to that agreement, we'll take that out to teachers to vote on Friday, May 1st. We probably have a very short deadline for that. Maybe from Friday to Monday or Friday to Tuesday. With that approval, we'll then take it to the governing board. But I will check back with the back end of things to make sure we're building enough space on the back side of this thing too.
Okay, so what I heard there is that you're working on the back channel stuff and the payments and this and that, and then you want us to propose the actual document itself.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then this will be on the agenda for next time, and hopefully we'll have the agreement that we need to then take it to teachers.
Okay. In a normal situation, I would ask for a caucus right now, but I don't know how it works in terms of breaking into room. Can I, Liz, you there? Liz?
I'm here.
Hey,
I'm here.
if we break into rooms, will it record on the YouTube or the YouTube? I sound like my grandparents. Or will it pause the? Do you have any idea?
All I know is that the stream would remain live. So whatever you have open to the live stream would be part of YouTube. So if you wanted to pause, then I could send a different link and we could just mute ourselves in this conversation and go to a different link.
Yeah. Do you guys, team, do you want to do that or do you want to just keep going for now? Sorry, I'm putting everyone on the spot.
Jay, if you feel it's really important right now, then yeah.
No, we can talk about it later because we don't need to make a decision right this second. So let's just talk about it later.
Okay, then we will move on. So if there's no more questions about Prop 301, let's move on to Makisa.
I would just add.
Go ahead, Dana.
Well, if we're saying that a decision needs to be made, I think that decision should go through our back channels by Monday, just so we know where we're at by then. So if we're saying we need to go back and make a decision, and if this is agreeable, then we can get that decision to the district team by Monday. Mm-hmm. Nicole, you had something, right?
Okay, my other question was, I know that some teachers have like their certificates in their classrooms or call logs in their classrooms. So do we have some wiggle room on evidence that we're providing? I mean, are we just going to count on the sign-in sheets that we did, or communication that we've already submitted to our principals?
Yeah, there would absolutely be wiggle room with that. Again, what I see teachers preparing is really that one-page document. In terms of doing the homework to substantiate that, I'm sure that those documents exist, and should we ever find ourselves in a position to have to do that, we could. especially because, hopefully the classrooms will be back open at some point. But I don't see teachers submitting a manila file folder of materials here, including things like certificates. I just want to make sure I'm understanding, Dana, your suggestion. Is it that on Monday we would say we agree and then we'll have a form ready for the meeting on Thursday? Or is it on Monday you would say we agree and here's the form? And I just asked because then that would change my timeline in terms of coming up with the back end. If we were able to say via email Monday there's an agreement, we could get that to teachers even earlier than Friday, May 1st. But at the same time, I don't want to rush it. If you're saying you want to go a little bit slower than that, we can do it as well.
I think I might have been saying that if we felt like we needed to move away from this form to be able to talk freely to make an agreement, that we would get you that agreement by Monday. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I imagine that we'll probably talk before Monday, but and we'll probably know what we want to say. So in the event that we say yes, then I don't see why we couldn't also include a form. So I guess if the answer is yes, maybe there'll be a form. And if the answer is no, we have a different idea, then it'll be something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have a different idea, you got a better idea, by all means. And the more, if you had a form for the better idea, that would help too, because the back end would still probably stay the same. And so I'll still work on doing the back end before Monday, so that way I can time it out with wherever you may be.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, Dana? Okay, well, let's move on to Makisa and teacher evaluation update.
All right, Makisa teacher evaluation update, hot off the press. Spoke with Leslie Beecham just shortly before this meeting to get the latest from them. As I shared last week, what is complicating this is that the federal DOE has said they're going to get their own legal recommendations and have a timeline, but that wouldn't be ready until the middle of May. Makisa is certainly aware of the pressure that puts, and it's not just us, it's every district who's participating in the real grant. And so their plan is to have their own plan ready for the middle of May to present to the federal government and the federal DOE, excuse me, so that way they can be as proactive as possible to take advantage of that window. The plan that we are working on, or that Makisa is working on, does have to do with practice-related growth. So the good news of this is even if the plan wasn't figured out until the end of May and the school year is over, there would not be anything additional that teachers would need to do if we were to use practice-related growth. And so what we would do is we would say, however many evaluations you had this year, the vast majority, I think there's very few people that had 0. And we would have to come up with something for those 3 or 4 folks. If you had, most everybody has at least 1. I think almost all, if not all of our new teachers have 2 already finished. We would use those 2 scores to do the first part of your evaluation score, of your real score. The second part would be practice-related growth. So our special educators already use this, and our teachers who have very low student counts use this as well. And what it does is it brings in 5 observation elements that correlate most to student achievement. And that becomes the proxy or the stand-in for student achievement because your students are not taking a post-test. Those 5 elements are student progress, practice-aligned activity, teacher-to-student interaction, authentic engagement, and routines and procedures. So those would be used to calculate your student achievement or your student growth, and then your observation scores would be based on the observations that you already have.
Hey,
Vic,
Vic,
can you repeat those?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I know I'm certainly going fast, and I can put these in email later, but the 5 are student progress,
Yep.
practice aligned activity, teacher to student interaction, authentic engagement, and routines and procedures. And again, the way those 5 are calculated, the folks who do these analyses look at student growth and they look at observation scores and they run correlations. And these are the 5 that are most highly correlated to student growth.
So just to confirm, it's student progress, practice alignment. I can't read my handwriting. Authentic engagement, teacher to student, and then routines and procedures.
That's correct. And I'll go ahead and actually put that in the chat too. So that way it's in the recording and you can look at that after the meeting as well.
Great. Thanks.
So the next steps for that, unfortunately, are to wait. But I hope that it's not a nervous waiting. There will not be an additional observation that we would put on. Or I did hear about a district who's going to do observations as Zoom meetings, and live lessons through Zoom, and that just doesn't seem like a great idea. And so we wouldn't look at doing that, nor would we rustle your kids together to take some meaningless assessment. Just for the purpose of coming up with a real score. So we would take what we have and do the best with it. Again, the good news being, I think the number of people with no observations is less than 5. And it's some very unique circumstances of people being hired mid-year or things that again relate to somebody being on leave for longer than 12 weeks.
I have a clarifying question. Okay, so I know we talked last week about potentially like some mix of last year's scores, this year's scores. Are we dead set on this year's scores, or even that's still up in the air?
It's still up in the air, but I would say that using last year's scores isn't our plan A. And when it comes to McKeesa telling the federal DOE, this is what we want to do, that isn't what they're going to use, because last year's scores would already not be in alignment to the grant requirements. The one thing I mentioned last time was maybe using like future scores. So I did learn of a district today that is doing a 2-year observation now. So they're going to add an observation like in the fall semester of next year to do a half-year evaluation. It sounds really complicated. I don't know that we need to do anything that complicated because again, we're far enough along in our observations. The district that's doing that only requires 1 observation a year. And so a huge amount of their teachers don't have any observations. And that's why they're coming up with like a 1.5-year long observation cycle.
So is there a chance, Vic, I mean, I know this is pure speculation, but there's a chance that we won't know these McKeesa scores potentially for a little while, maybe push back depending on how slow the US DOE is?
Correct. The strange thing about this is what you're not going to know is the calculation, like the algorithm to come up with the score. You might actually get your real score earlier because if you remember this year, they were delayed several weeks because of Galileo.
Right.
Well, there's no Galileo tests. And so the real scores might be able to get calculated much, much quicker. But it's going to take us time to get the thumbs up from federal DOE.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question? Okay, then let's move to agenda item number 3, which is our district's counter proposal to 6%, just a 6% raise. We proposed, PECTA proposed this on 2/25.
All right, yeah, so proposal 1 from PECTA included a base salary raise of 6%, as well as a payout of $1,500 using classroom site fund for all certified staff, and certificated professional support staff also receiving a payout of $1,500. So on March 4th, I was preparing a document that I'm going to share with you in just a moment. And it was just about ready to go. And then I think you all know what happened the afternoon of March 4th into March 5th and March 6th. So this has certainly been a long time coming, and I definitely appreciate everybody's patience as this has happened. Unfortunately, since March 4th, it's not as though all of a sudden we found any kind of new solid ground. It feels like every day things just continue to go up and they go down in terms of what life in COVID-19 looks like, how long this shutdown is going to last, how long are our schools going to be closed. And so there was news that came out earlier this week that certainly sent a chill down my spine. And that is a growing fear among education leaders that the state is going to face as high as $1.1 billion budget deficit as a result of COVID-19. And that $1.1 billion budget deficit will be balanced on the back of K-12 education. For those of us who were here during the Great Recession, we know what that looked like. We know what that felt like. In light of that fear, I've checked in with HR leaders around the county today on a Zoom call that we did. I know that Dr. Weeks has met with several superintendents as well. We've been trying to assess, is this fear or is there some fact in this as well in terms of where we're headed? We're at a point right now where it's a mixture of both. And because it's a mixture of both, whereas we hope to have shared a counter proposal today, what I actually have for you is a budget snapshot and not a counter proposal. The good news, I still think this is going to be a great use of our time because I want to go with you through what the budget looks like and what money would be available for salary increases and answer the questions that we received at the Meet and Confer meeting before spring break in terms of these different funding sources and whether or not they'd be able to use for salary increases. So I do have a document I'm going to share with you. I believe I can share my screen. You're going to see the word draft is all over it because it's just about ready for sharing. And as soon as it's ready, I'll have that ready for you. But without further ado, I'm sharing with you an infographic about our budget. Can I get a thumbs up if you're all seeing that? I'm seeing a lot of squinty eyes, so I think that you are. And because I'm seeing the squinty eyes, I can take some time to make this a little bit bigger. So when you think about our state budget, or I'm sorry, our district's budget, there's a couple of important things to know. The first thing is that some things are going up and some things are going down. So when we think about the things that are going up in our maintenance and operations budget, one is salaries. We have seen that every employee of the district has enjoyed salary increases each of the past 2 years, and that our average salaries have risen. That is possible because the other things that are going up, per pupil funding and base level support. Why is per pupil funding, base level support, and salaries going up? Red for Ed. And for that, I always say thank you. And for that, I'm wearing my red shirt today because it's thanks to the advocacy of our teachers that we can say that these things are going up. Because if it wasn't for that, the only thing in this era would be insurance costs, which are also going up. Even though salaries and per pupil funding are going up, there are some very important things that are going down in our district though. And the most notable, of course, of those is enrollment. We've had double-digit percentage decreases of enrollment over the past several years, and that's been well talked about. And enrollment is going down because there are less families in our neighborhoods. There's less babies being born. There is not affordable housing for families in our neighborhoods. And so the demographic shift that's happening in Central Phoenix is impacting us quite negatively. I think I've shared this before, but the only elementary school district that's been experiencing student growth in the past 4 years is Levine. And that's because all the homes they're building out there. Every other district in Maricopa County is seeing a decrease in their enrollments. So that drives down our average daily membership, and that ADM is what's used to create the budget. So the other things that sadly have gone down is our overall staff. Over the past 5 years, 25% of positions at Emerson Court have been eliminated. But those cuts have not been exclusive to just central office. If I go to any campus, I'm going to see empty classrooms. And I hear stories that 10 years ago, we had 4 kindergarten teachers at our schools, when now we have 2, only a couple have 3, and some even have as low as 1 kindergarten teacher. So staff is also going down. And then our title funding has gone down as well, which puts some more pressure on our M&O. And so in these 2 arrows, what I tried to do is make one darker and sort of thicker. And the reason I did that is what's very important to know is that these things are going down faster and heavier than the things that are going up. And it's creating an imbalance in our budget. And there's 2 things I can show you to show you that that's true. The first is a look at our M&O budget, including our carryover since 2017. What you'll see is that the budget projection that Janice has for us is at $53 million. That is almost identical to the budget that we had in place in 2017. There was a spike in 2019. Again, this is red for Ed, and thank you very much for that increase in our funding. But the funding has come right back down where we don't have that anymore. That is it doesn't make sense. We're getting more money per student, but our budget's going down. It's because we're losing that many students. So if we look at our M&O budget and what % of it goes into salaries, In 2017, it was 77%. And right now it's 82.5%. We don't know what it is next year because we don't know what the salary, what a salary increase might look like. But if we do a salary increase, that number is going to go up. The danger of that number going up means when we cut M&O budget, we have to cut people. And if you were a part of the PBB process this year, you saw that. Almost every single budget package was cutting people because that is the major part of our M&O budget. So in the face of that imbalance, the district administration has done a couple of things that I want to point out. In terms of revising the 2019-2020 budget, we did cut $1 million from the M&O budget last year through performance-based budgeting. Several people on this table or this Zoom call were part of that process. In October, we made a $1.4 million budget reduction to the governing board. And what I define that as is imagine halfway through the month, you realize, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make rent. I'm going to be $140 short. So what do? You cut your spending for the rest of the month by $140. That's what we did in October. We cut our spending short $1.4 million. We did that in part through a hiring chill that was around the district. When positions became open after October, we double and triple and quadruple checked whether or not that was an essential position. And if we felt like it wasn't, it was temporarily frozen. Several positions obviously were essential, teaching positions, for instance, but IA positions, our district receptionist position, were all temporarily frozen as part of that chill. So we're also looking in the next year's budget when it comes to this imbalance. And in looking next year's budget, there's a couple of things that we did. First is we made a much bigger cut in performance-based budgeting. Instead of $1 million, we cut $2.1 million. We're also looking at district additional assistance. One of the dynamics that's happening across the state right now is that money is being used in the M&O that is not getting used in capital. So our computers and our buildings are getting older and we don't have the money to fix those things. So the administration does intend to use the $400,000 increase in DAA for capital improvement projects that are sorely needed across the district. The other thing that we're doing is instead of setting a budget that anticipates a decrease of about 150 students, we're setting a budget that anticipates a loss of 300 to 400 students. Sounds like a lot, but that's what we lost this year. And if I did a straw poll of if we think we're going to have the same amount of students next year as we do this year, and if we think we're going to lose more students next year than this year, I think most people would say that it's very murky. And so it's important that we have that cushion. So the question we're all been waiting to hear is what might be available for additional expenditures in 2021, in particular salary increases. So what's available is $2.1 million that was cut through the PBB process. There is some additional funding that could be available through indirect costs. But important things to know about indirect costs, even though that there are $4.2 million in our indirect cost budget, $1 million of that already goes to salaries and other expenses. We've also been told that we will not receive indirect costs in 2020, 2021. What would not be available is carry forward. There would be about $3 million in the carry forward budget. It wouldn't be available because it's already spent. It's going to be used to offset decreases in enrollment and that we're estimating at about $7,000 a student. If you do that math, that's the loss of 400 students. Now, we may find ourselves in a position where we didn't lose 400 students, but we would want to be in a position where we have enough of a cushion that if we see a massive loss of students, we wouldn't have to cut massive budget in the middle of a school year. And so when we think about the indirect costs, what's challenging about that, because carry forward is being used for the cushion, indirect costs really turned into our savings account. And just like in personal finance, you don't use your savings account to pay for your lifestyle. We don't want to use our savings account to pay for salary increases. That's backwards. You use your lifestyle, use your savings account to think about how you want to live your life. And so we need to think about that 4.2 million in terms of being that safety net for us. There's also some additional expenditures that have already been incurred since the setting of the budget. Insurance did go up for the district this year, not for employees. It went up for employee dependents, but $154,823. We also, in the PBB process, the governing board approved an increase of the special areas package to a 95% cut, which meant 2.5 more special area teachers. That we budgeted at about $150,000. Minimum wage is going up by the rate of inflation. Janice has calculated that to be about 52,000. And then ASRS contributions are going up again. And as that goes up, that will incur the district another $50,000. So all of that being said, the number that is most on my mind today is all the way at the top of this document, and it's the projected budget. Because in hearing that the state's going to have a $1.1 billion deficit, knowing what has happened in the past, there is a chance that that 53 million will not be 53 million because the base level support, the per pupil funding, the district additional assistance, other things like that are going to get cut. And so that's why I say this is available for additional expenditures, but it's all contingent on the state budget. I've heard two contradictory things about the state budget. I heard that they may close it on May 1st, close the legislative session and come back in a special session in the middle of the summer to do the budget. I've also heard they're not going to do that because they're sitting on a mountain of bills and they need to get those bills pushed through. But it might be some months until we know exactly what they're going to plan to cut out of the budget. Now, let's say they say we're not going to make a cut for 2021, but in 2022, there are large cuts looming. We'll go back to the next chart. If more than 83% of our budget is based on salaries and large cuts come, you can see what would happen from that. And we would find ourselves back in the position the district was in during the Great Recession. I share all that with as much honesty as I can. I will answer any question that you have. The one thing I want to say is I share this information the way I do because, again, we're in this together. Whether that is a cut to the budget or a longer closure of schools, that's going to impact not just one group of employees in the district. It won't just impact the teachers, and it won't just impact us as staff. It impacts our entire community. It's another example of just the threat to public education that we face right now. And so I don't want to drop the mic right now. I really want to pass it and hear what questions you have, what feelings you have, what thoughts you have as I share this snapshot of the budget. I have asked Janice to be here to answer questions. And thank you so much for being here, Janice. And then we also have our administrators here too that I can speak to some of the questions you have. So with that, I'd love to hear any questions and thoughts and feelings that you have.
Yeah, I have one. Thank you so much for sharing this and being very transparent with this to everyone watching. So 2.1 million available for salaries. It would cost 1,176,605 for 5% and 1,411,926 for 6%. Can we expect to see a proposal on what are Phoenix L's intentions?
Well, let me share one other thing with you here, and that is a better calculation of what 1% raises would look like. So when I met with Janice earlier this week, Janice realized, and thank you for catching this, Janice, that the PECTA proposal proposed salary increases for more people than we consider to be certificated teachers. So we had to shuffle those people around. So what we wrote here was just PECTA. These are the people that are in proposal 1, and the 1% raise is calculated there. For hourly support, exempt support, and administration, you'll also see it's there as well. In terms of district administration having a counter proposal, I want to hear how this makes you feel. I want to also recognize that there's other stakeholders that we want to share this information with too, in order to, again, hear what people's feelings are, what people's thoughts are as it pertains to where we find ourselves on April 23rd, 2020, and what that might mean for the coming months ahead as this state falls into a recession.
All right, so I guess I'll get started here. So I guess one, you know, of course, I'll just say it again, when, you know, our educators are working hard and everyone else is, and one thing that why we do this is we want to provide some future stability, both stability in the pocketbook, but also stability up here. Educators need to be able to start planning. And if that planning means because they did not receive the raise that they felt they were due, whether we could do it or not, they may need to make future plans. So I ask a district that really as soon as possible, when possible, to please give us a counter proposal so we can let our educators start feeling what is coming next year.
And going off of that, so Vic, would it be, if I'm going to make a statement, you say if it's fair or not fair to say. So would it be hard for you and Janice and district to send a counter proposal if you don't know what Ducey and the AZ leg is going to do with the budget?
I think it's fair. It's fair to say. But it's Ducey and the ledge. It's everybody. What are we collectively thinking and what are we collectively feeling? Advocacy is going to be important. And if we have advocacy and that our budgets are going to be protected, that'd be an important thing to know. I will say that the superintendent did meet with an elected official yesterday and did not leave that meeting with a ton of assurance that the budget would be untouched. The K-12 budget would be untouched, I should say. But again, we're trying to distinguish facts from fear. And so we're trying to collect some sort of facts about how we feel about the fear in terms of getting a collection of voices and really getting a lot of stakeholders' input when it comes to thinking about the best way to move forward with our budget for next year. And obviously, you all are the first people that are seeing this because we value your voice, we value your input.
I'll speak. I think that I think that PECTA wants to see the district thriving, despite the financial situation. So I think that we want to see our district doing well, but at the same time, we have a responsibility to try to secure what we can for our members in terms of, a salary increase that I think people might feel like they're owed. And I don't know what's going to happen necessarily with the remaining 5% of the 20 by 20. But if in fact that money comes, then I think people may feel like, well, there's that money. So I think that there's a balancing act that we have to play a little bit in terms of making sure that we, our goal is not to bankrupt the district. Our goal is to try to do something that will help our members, but also keep our district working the way that it should for kids and for families, because ultimately that's what we do. And we don't want to get to a point where we have to cut services or get to a point in the next year that we're at class sizes of 35 with an aide, because that's not what's best for kids either. So I'm glad that we have the numbers. I have a few questions about the numbers, but it seems like you maybe want to get people's feelings about it first. I can wait for my questions, but I definitely have questions.
I do have another feelings question. Sorry, Dana, breaking up Dana's data. But so I'm a little confused because yes, they haven't come back to finalize the budget, but didn't they pass the K-12 budget? Wasn't that passed? So isn't that money there by definition?
Yes, this reflects the skinny budget that was passed.
Right.
The fear is that there'll be a special session in the middle of the summer.
That'll cut it.
So I talked to 9 HR professionals this morning, including districts that did increases in February. And they're already teeing up readings of contracts. If you read your contract, right, you're going to find there's language in there about wage garnishments and furloughs and things of that nature. They're already preparing those things because they know that they have offered. So the 20 by 20 is a perfect example of this. The 53 million in M&O includes the 20 by 20, the next 5%. If that is what they take away, that won't be 53 million. And so the districts I talked to that have already done increases, that's where their mind is now at, is preparing to take advantage of whatever flexibility they would have to alter contracts. If we think that that can't be done, we don't have to look far. We look at what happened to Murphy when they stretched their budget too thin at the beginning of the year. And halfway through the year, we're looking at furloughing staff because they weren't going to cover payroll. We are not in that boat. And that's due to Janice's hard work and everybody's collaboration on the budget through the performance-based budgeting process. But it would certainly be a fear if we saw, one, a rollback of the 20 by 20 money, to a additional 1 or 2 or 3% cut of K-12 education, or cut on any other funds that we depend on to fund other things. When we have other things get cut, like title funds, it puts more pressure on the M&O to sustain those things.
Dr. Diaz. Oh,
I just had a question. If the current legislative budget is passed and is set, is it possible for the district to come back with a proposal based on that, knowing that if something happens midsummer with special legislative sessions, as you pointed out in this PowerPoint, Red for Ed was very powerful and created those raises at a time when cuts were threatened. And I would assume that if special legislative sessions were happening in the summer, Red for Ed would rally again, and everything possible would be done to block that from coming out of education. So until we know that those cuts, is it possible not to react on fear and to react on, here's what we know, here's what was passed, here's what we can propose based on that, and we'll come back to the drawing board if there's a special session in the summer and have to relook at it.
Yeah, there's a potential we could do that. And that's, again, why I want to hear y'all's thoughts and what your feelings are. The challenge of doing something like that is, it goes back to, is it better to give something late or to give something and then take it back? And so we could do something that would say that here's a contingency of how the money would go away. We could also do let's get through X day, or let's get through that special session and then come back to the table to figure this out. If a special session happened that slashed the budget in a way that would actually, we'd be looking at something other than salary increases, we're looking at the opposite of that, then of course we would all be back at the table to talk to one another. But yeah, it is possible to do something like that. Again, the difficult thing is you gave them something and then you took it away. My fear, to your point, Chico, is that will lead people to make decisions in July that will make things very difficult for us in August. The budget got cut, and so you're losing whatever that increase was. Well, now I'm leaving, and now they're leaving in July, and that's going to handcuff us in some pretty tough ways.
With that being said, and just piggybacking off kind of what Julie said there, creating a potential counter proposal with an asterisk, making it well known to everybody as we propose this, going off the skinny budget that was passed. Those educators would be able to see the potential, of course, knowing that if the state came back and cut that, well, that's not district's fault, that's the state's fault. And then, hopefully we do a Red for Ed thing and take that money back. But is that a possibility? Again, everyone watching this live, it would be with an asterisk, knowing that this would be the proposal if state budget stayed on course as it is right now.
I could definitely speak with Cabinet about that. We could, again, also do the asterisk in the opposite direction. This is the increase now, but if we get to X day and the budget's still whole, it will increase to this. And so that way we wouldn't be taking anything away from anybody. We would just be continuing to add. So that could be another direction to accomplish a very similar thing. That would simply buy us time in order to make sure that we get through what we need to get through to feel confident.
If we went with that option, I would want to be absolutely crystal clear on what the number is that would come from the state that would equate to whatever extra percentage of a raise. So that sounds a little bit scary just because it sounds like, well, you can get 2% now. And if the money comes and it's like, well, how much money? What does that mean? What's the other percentage? You know, that just sounds a little bit scary, I think, for us on our end to, unless the language was absolutely so crystal clear. And maybe even a couple of different contingencies, just because that may be the reality too, that there may be more than one outcome.
And we would want that in the opposite direction too, that if we're going to reach in and take it, we got to be really clear on what happened and what we're taking and how it's being taken and when it's being taken, especially, I mean, this would be awful, but if that special session happened late enough in July that a paycheck's already been issued, and now we got to reach in and take things back because of what just happened. And so, yeah, crystal clear, vetted by many, and I and an attorney. I mean, we would probably, yeah, want to bring in as many people as possible to make sure it's very clear what these different triggers would be in the direction.
Vic, I have a follow-up question. Well, kind of a not follow-up, but about the topic. Are there any other ideas that you've come up with that you feel comfortable sharing, or are you kind of still at the drawing board, or?
Why, yes, Jay, there is.
Okay,
Such clairvoyance. Yeah, I do. I wanted to talk a little bit about TIP 4 today, but I also want to make sure that Danny, you said a question about the numbers, and that's why we have Janice here, and I'm actually also happy to speak about these numbers as well. Eager to hear what questions it raises in terms of just the snapshot.
Just so I can make sure that we're operating from the same set of numbers, the projected budget, what did you guys project for the loss in ADM to make your projected budget for next year?
Janice, are you able to respond to that?
Yeah, sorry, I was having a little issue with that meeting. I did a projection of 300 down for that. Left all the special ed weighted counts and stuff the same, but just 300 general ed down is the projection I did to come up with, and a $3 million carry forward. I projected that, which was higher than the initial $2 million, because about the only good thing about this is we're going to save a little bit of money, that we're not going to spend in this fiscal year.
Okay, and then what was your total weighted student count that you used to calculate?
I didn't cut the weighted. Well, yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the budget, but I just did 300 down from what we had in this fiscal year. Okay,
so then Vic, maybe could we have the actual number? Like, what is the total weighted student count that you're operating from when you look at what the ADM is and you weight it?
I ended up with, yeah, I can look it up for you if you want to move on. I'll do that while because I don't have a computer. I can just look that up for us.
Okay, yes, that would be helpful. Thank you, Janice. And then I just want to clarify a point that you made, Vic, make sure I'm understanding that correctly. You're saying in terms of the indirect costs, that's what's sitting in there right now. That's not even, well, you're saying that there's not going to be any indirect costs coming next year. So one thing that we talked about last time, maybe a couple of meetings ago, was like, who was the source? What was the source of that information of knowing that we were not going to have any indirect costs for next year?
ADE,
okay.
They sent us a letter telling us we wouldn't get any indirect costs.
Okay. And then, so the 4.2 million includes what's just in there right now and all those different line items. In the budget.
They're at the beginning of the fiscal year, but about $1 million of that is currently paying for salaries and some other items.
Okay, and so Vic, were you saying that it is the district's thought that they would not want to use indirect costs, or maybe that you would use indirect costs to help pay for raising?
I'm not sure, but probably not, because that would probably be what we would use for our savings. It's highly recommended by ASVO and other organizations to carry over 10%. We won't be carrying over 10%, but we hope to carry somewhere in the indirect cost to use that as a savings, especially now with not knowing what our budget's going to look like next year and already knowing that we will take a really bad hit in 21-22.
Okay. What is the percentage that you project to carry forward? I know it's 3.3 million, but what's the
3
percentage?
million, so out of the 54 million, that's,
I guess I could calculate it.
6% or I'm guessing.
And so what would the additional indirect costs, you're saying you want to use that to essentially kind of carry forward, to add to that carry forward and to save. How much of that are you wanting to say, I don't want to touch it, we just want to save it?
Yeah, I think for the most part, and again, this isn't my decision, so this will be up our administration decision, but I think for the most part, we want to save it because even with, as you can see, even with carrying over 3 million, our budget is still less than last year. And, you know, we have to sustain these raises and it keeps eating up, as you can see from the chart, every year we're getting into higher percentage of just salary and benefits, and that's squeezing out any money we have for other items. And with Title I and other funding going down every year as well, it's just, you know, everywhere is squeezing more. And so, you know, in times like this, it makes you kind of want to hold on a little bit more than you would normally.
Okay.
Because we just feel so uncertain now, and especially now that they're threatening the next year budget. We don't even know for sure that that's going to be what they promised us.
So then that potentially that might be 3.2 million. So I'm just looking at like taking away the 1 million that's already used. So that means 3.2 million would move forward to the next year, giving you kind of like a savings of 6 million? Or are you saying, well, we'll use another 1 million next year, and so maybe it'll be a little less than that?
The 3 million that's the carry forward really isn't a savings. It's all it is doing is shoring up the budget. It's not really a savings. I know it seems like that, but all it is trying to keep our budget current with what we've had in the past, because our falling enrollment is causing our budget to go down year after year after year. So it's like I'm having to save more just to get it to stay the same as the year prior, because the enrollment is causing our funding to be so much less.
So does that mean like that 3 million in carry forward you use in the next year? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's included in that $53 million projection, which is less than what we currently have. If we didn't have that, we'd only be 50 million, and we'd really be in a world of hurt.
Yeah, going back to like that personal finance example, you know, if you have a checking account and you have a savings account, the $3 million is in the checking account, not the savings account. It's the cushion that you're carrying forward from month to month, just in case something were to happen. This year, it was that cushion that paid for the $1.4 million reduction in October. Even though we reduced the salary by 1.4, I think the vast majority of people never felt it because we had a little bit of that cushion left over for next year. So it like I said, it's in terms of savings, it's sort of like at the end of the month, you've got a little bit of extra money you can play with. But if something happens that next month, it's gone. That's the way that carry forward's being treated. It's not going into a separate savings account. It's going into like the sock drawer, and the sock drawer money is for when the thing happens.
Okay. And then the 400K in additional DAA that is the plan to use for capital projects. I guess, how does it work if we had our capital override? So we know that there's funds from our override. Is what we got from our capital override not enough to pay for what we need in terms of our buildings, which is why we feel we are not going to roll DAA over into MNO like we have in the past?
Do you want me to take this one, Rick? The capital override, yeah, we'll pay for the majority of things, but it is restricted to just the things that were written in the plan. So we need some money for other things, and we haven't been putting any capital money. We've been dumping all of our DAA into M&O. So I know the superintendent wanted us to put any additional funding we were going to get to capital to kind of shore that up. However, I strongly believe that we're not even going to receive those funds. I think that's going to be the first area we're going to cut, because they haven't really given it to us yet. So it would be easier for them to take that away. But I don't know that. That's just a theory.
Okay. I think that might be all I have. If anybody else from our team has any more questions specifically about the numbers. And Vic, you will send this to us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
I have a question about the percentage of M&O budget for salaries. I was just comparing it to the Auditor General report. And so it looked to me like we're spending like 79% on salaries. So is this, is the Auditor General report for calendar year? And are these numbers that you have here for calendar year?
No, it's the Auditor General report should be fiscal year, and this should be fiscal year.
Okay.
I don't know, I'd have to research a variance. I don't know if this is what I came up with, but it's salary and benefits. And I know they don't include some things. They're kind of picky about the way they do the report. So I just included everything. I think they back a few things out, although I'd have to research
Also, if you're looking at our general report, you're looking at a past year. The Auditor General report for today will come out like a year from now. And so I think you said 79. If you did, you might have been looking at 2019.
Mm-hmm. And I just didn't know about the teacher experience index. So when I look at our budget, it looks like, I don't know for sure how to read it, but does that bring us, in one column, I'm seeing that it brings us $540,000. And then in another column, I'm seeing that it brings us $1.1 million. Does that, where does the teacher experience index money go to?
It just goes into part of the base support level. I'm trying to see if I can figure out on this thing.
Yeah, that would be part of the base support level that goes into the M&O. It's part of the 53 million.
Yeah.
Or last year, or this current year, 54 million, year before 54.2.
So just because I don't understand how to read that.
I mean, what I could actually do is we could probably email you the proposed budget that I did, and then you could look at the numbers for yourself.
Yeah, that'd be great. Because I was wondering if it brought us 560 or 540,000 or 1.1 million or both.
I don't know what it doesn't on the budget sheet I have. It doesn't show you the breakdown of how much extra that is.
Okay.
But yes, it definitely helps. We'll take everything we can get.
Yeah. And so my last question is, okay, so what I'm hearing is that the district is proposing no raises until you get the budget?
No, that's not what we're saying. No, it's more what Jay said about 20 minutes ago. It's hard to make a proposal with that level of uncertainty right now without knowing how everybody feels about the uncertainty. We want to make sure that we're getting a good sense of that. So for instance, you know, when I'm thinking about what our next steps are from here, I would want to know if PECTA still is asking for a 6% increase and for $1,500 for that group of people that don't get $1,500 in light of the budget that you see here. And if you are, that's fine. And we'll move from that. Or does that change at all with the information you're receiving today and knowing that there is a level of uncertainty going into the summer? And obviously you don't have to answer that now, and we don't have a caucus space set up, or if we did, I mean, I would understand a caucus at this point. But that's where we are as an admin right now. We want to make sure we're getting a lot of stakeholders' voices, we're getting a lot of input from people, so that to the point that was made earlier, we aren't basing decisions based on fear, or if we are, it's a very rational and understood fear that's based in fact. But we want to understand how people are feeling, what people are thinking when they see this.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one more question? The reduction that we're going to experience in Title I money, what's the hit on M&O because of that, if you know that? be hard to calculate.
I don't, because I haven't yet seen the budget for the new year for Title I. I don't know that Sherry's got that completed yet. So I don't have the answer to that, sorry.
Okay.
And so I don't know if this is for Janice or for Vic, you guys tell me. But with the budget that you proposed right here on the publisher page, Vic, you're showing us what you have. So, but you're still not comfortable coming up with a proposal based off of this information yet. Is that true, or?
Yeah, as of 3 p.m. today, very true. Again, knowing that you are all, this is the first time that we've shared this. I think from here, what I'm excited about with the document that we created here is we can really start conversation with lots of other people. I'm not saying we're going to feel that way until 2022 and the next round of state elections. But just as of 3 p.m. today, that's where we are.
So just a time check, it's 4:15. And I know we're supposed to think about our time checks. I don't know, Chico, what do you want to do?
Thank you for being the timekeeper. I guess we can just, I feel we're in some really good talks right now, and I would like to make a request to both PECTA and the board if possibly we could push this out another 10 minutes. We'll just do it by thumbs up or thumbs down. Thumbs up if you can be on this call 10 more minutes, thumbs down if you can't. Go ahead and just put them up. Great, thank you so much.
I'm sorry to have a previous engagement.
No problem, no problem. We'll not ask too technical number questions then.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for what you've done today, Janice.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Janice.
Thank you, Janice.
Hey, Vic, moving forward, I'd like to kind of address, obviously, with the numbers we've seen now, we're still here to bargain and negotiate. So I think what all of us would like to see is just what a 5%, 6% proposal would look like. Who would it help? Or if it would potentially hurt other things. I think we just want to see exactly what that 5%, 6% would look like, and where it could help and where it could potentially hurt in other areas.
Yeah, understood. So like I said, I'll email this to you and you'll be able to see that. In terms of hurting and helping, Jay mentioned this earlier, and I'm definitely able to say for a bit longer. But one of the things we know about percent salary increases, when we give a percent salary increase to any group, it widens the gap between the top and the bottom, because 10% for somebody making 40,000 is less than 10% for somebody making 60,000. What we know about our teachers is that our teachers by far and away are the least compressed group that we have across the district. So if you look at the variance from IA to IA, it's low. I mean, they're all really tightly packed, the variance between principal to principal. But teacher to teacher is really variant. And if we give a percentage, it's only going to increase the variance more. And so part of the function of that is money from TIF 4. And the pressure that TIF 4 is putting on our M&O budget, not necessarily this upcoming year, but in future years when the TIF 4 war chest that was in the 301 fund is depleted. And we have to figure out if we're going to sustain this, it's got to get sustained out of M&O. So one idea that I've had is to do something where we may take a group of people who are getting a substantial amount of TIF 4 money and ask them if they would be willing to take a salary increase in their base that would become a dollar for dollar decrease in their TIF. So what that would mean is if you're making 40 off your base and 15 off a TIF, and there's people who are doing that right now, you need to balance that a bit better. You don't want all your money in TIF like that. And so what you might do is a 5% increase of your base, and that would take you up to 42. but then your TIF would go from 15 to 13. So as it does that, you actually would not get a raise. You would be making the same amount of money, but what you did get is more base salary. So why in the world would you do that? You would do that because if we take 13 and multiply it by all the people getting TIF, did we free up enough money in the 301 that TIF could be possibly extended? There's very detailed numbers we would have to do to figure that out, and it would have to be a substantial enough raise to actually do something like that. But that would be part of one of the things that we want to look at with any salary increase to see if there's something we can do to lengthen and to sustain TIF, and to pull us out of the imbalance that some of you as individuals are facing when you have such a high amount of your salary coming out of TIF compared to your base.
Can I ask a question about that? So would that then, that sounds like that might drive the percentage that from our M&O budget that pays for salaries, wouldn't it? Like, so if you move what teachers get from the classroom site fund into their salary base, which comes from M&O, isn't it going to move maybe the percentage of salaries for M&O to 90%?
Yeah, absolutely, it could. Absolutely.
Which I thought you guys wanted to avoid that.
Correct. So it's all these competing priorities in terms of everything and every part of this budget that you're trying to balance out. So that would obviously be something that we would want to look at. The reason, again, we would do that is to see if there's something we can do around sustaining that TIF money. But it would only be possible if we have other things that we can do that with.
Could you also explain, Vic? So the like when you said, well, why would you do that? The why would you do that sounded like a win for the district, but not necessarily a win for the individual, unless TIF all goes away and we don't have any money, and I guess you're left with your base salary, which is $5,000 higher or whatever it is. Is exactly. That's the only reason why an individual teacher would want that option?
Yes, exactly. But also because, so again, let's do this 40-15 example, right? So next year it'd be 42 and 13. Well, why would I do that? I want 42 and 15. Don't touch my TIF and give me the 5%. But if that means that's the last year you're getting the 15, the third year you're at 42. But what if you went to 42 and 13 and then you could do 42 and 13 again, as opposed to just being left with 42 and nothing? That would be the reason to do it. It could only happen if we take a big enough bite though out of TIF. Right now, TIF 4 costs about $2.4 million every year. If we took, let's just say, a $600,000 chunk out of TIF 4 and it's at 1.8, we would have to look at this, but would we have the money to pay 1.8 for a second time? And so that's the other piece of the budget that Janice and I want to take a really close look at relative to any increases. To see if there's anything like that could give us the flexibility we need with TIF.
And the TIF 4 comes out of 11 or 12 or 13, I guess.
The TIF 4 is banked money from those years. So the years in which all performance-based compensation was based on the real grant. And the 301 committee, we studied this, we talked about this quite a bit. In those years, there was a sort of war chest that was created to make sure that we could sustain this after the grant ended. That's what we're getting paid out of right now, these banked funds.
Well, I know, but I'm just asking where you said they're 301 funds, yes?
Yes, right? Yeah.
So are they coming from several buckets or just 11 or 12 or which one? Which fund?
I don't remember which of the three right now are in the banked fund. And so I would have to look into that. I don't have 301 on the top of my head. I spent all day today prepping my knowledge of the M&O budget.
I might have it actually.
Okay.
But
there's a member of the 301 committee out there that I'm sure does.
Yeah, I think Aaron might have sent me something that might tell me what it is.
So again, it's a little bit of a out there crazy idea. But it would be that kind of thing that I would also want to bring to the table in terms of thinking creatively and innovatively about how to maximize salary increases to set people up for the long run. Because otherwise, I mean, to go back to our conversation earlier, would we do an agreement that would say you're going to get X% raise with an asterisk, and if this thing happens, we're taking some of it back? We would run into the same dynamic we run into now with TIF, where for every teacher that I have talked to about TIF 4, and I wasn't here in those years, for every teacher I've talked to who said, yeah, I knew that money was going away. They made that really clear that that money was going away. I talked to others that say, no, I have an email right here that I was going to get it forever. And so that type of ambiguity, when you're messing with taking things away with people's money, you're just inviting that kind of dissonance. And so, yeah, so we would want to be very clear, very thorough, make sure we understood and studied this to the fullest extent to see if it would be something that would be beneficial for people.
I have a question. When PECTA proposed this 6% raise, what we're looking at right here is you're running down a 1% for every category in the district. Like when we propose a 6%, are you looking at those 6% numbers then for every category in the district and assuming that administrators would get 6% and everybody in the district would get that 6% when you're looking at our proposal, or are you looking at it in a different way?
Good question. It's challenging because the PECTA proposal is just about that group of individuals. If we were to offer that type of a raise to one group, you know, the amenable idea would be you'd offer it to others. And I think that's what we've mostly seen over the past couple of years. In fact, last year support staff got a slightly higher raise when they got the 6%, whereas certified only got the 5%. Those are certainly numbers that we have in mind as we're thinking about making sure that the raises are keeping things in balance. I just spoke earlier today with an individual who's citing concerns with one of our salary schedules where somebody who would be a boss would make less than their direct reports. And I said, well, that happens in our schools all the time because we have teachers who make more than their principals. And it happens in our bus yard and it happens in the cafeteria. We have cafeteria workers who make more than their managers. Some of that is an impact of longevity and experience, but some of that is also an impact of percentage-based raises and differential sometimes in those percentage-based raises. So it would be something that we would have to look at together. Yeah.
I just want to clarify. So just to be clear though, PECTA and ESPA, they negotiate their raises. Other groups out there, those raises are offered to them. There is a difference. So I just want to be clear about that. You know, so we come to the table and we negotiate those raises. And if there's any other groups of people out there that don't fall under ESPA and PECTA, the district decides to offer them raises. That being said, I know that there was a meet and confer with ESPA. Did ESPA ask for increases in salary? Or did you guys agree to any increases in salary that might help us with our calculations?
We actually delayed it so I could take time to prepare what I have for you today, given what everything happened on Tuesday. So we will not have our meet and confer with ESPA until next week.
Because I do know that is kind of part of our concern is this effort and this negotiation and this is really strongly for certified staff and making sure, like our goal is to make sure certified staff are taken care of in the best way possible. And that's what we come to the table with in our mind. And then when the negotiation then is across the board, that makes it difficult for us to advocate for certified staff so strongly.
Okay, it has been 10 minutes. So Jay, if you have one more question.
Yeah. So Vic, there's probably people sitting out there going, wait a second, I don't make TIF for money. Or wait a second, I made TIF for a year and like the 5, you know what I'm saying? Where,
yeah.
So do you want to fill in that blank or?
Yeah, if you're not making TIF money, you get the salary increase. So if you're getting 40 and 0, you would get the 42 and 0. Mm-hmm. But you would get that salary increase. If you're making only a little bit of TIF money, let's say less than 5% of your base, we'd have to really look at that very closely and cut with a very fine knife in terms of parsing out what raises would look like for folks and how they fall on that to make it as fair as possible for as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing that just keeps popping in my head, but I never say it, but I'm just going to say it. You know, PECTA has also proposed, as part of that professional agreement we talked about, PECTA's talked about having a salary schedule where in the future, so if TIF does run out, when TIF runs out, we have a more equitable plan where maybe people take a little hit, but not that bad. So just so you know, like that's something that we're going to still be advocating for pretty strongly, especially if TIF 4, poof. So that's one thing. That's for you, Vic, but that's also for everyone to understand is that that's something we think that could be a solution to this issue that no doubt the state is causing for the district. So, yeah.
We do need to bring proposal 3 back to the table.
Yep.
So maybe we would do that in a meeting or two, and we can hammer that out in terms of pulling that. I mean, if I think about us doing this now in terms of any kind of exchange of money, we're giving extra resources to that committee to study the impact of that and to look at that as a model, and just to study that better. I hope that we put as much effort into that committee as we did with things like the class size committee this year, the Prop 301 committee this year, the curriculum adoptions that we did this year. That is front and center, a very prominent and well-resourced committee.
Definitely.
And can I ask one more clarifying question? This dangling of TIF 4 money could potentially be something for this year? Are you talking about it to be negotiated this year to go into effect next year or down the road?
Yeah, it could be for this year. Absolutely. I mean, that could be something if we find a shared interest that we start to bake into an agreement relative to proposal 1. And I think it's helpful that when I just think about who's on your meet and confer team, it's a pretty good cross section of folks who get TIF and who don't. And the same is true on our team. That TIF money influences administrators and folks in the central office and imbalances in their salaries in the same way it does for our teachers. So I think we got a good team together to think about that.
Dr. Diaz, so now that we've seen the numbers and you've kind of gotten a feel for how some of us are feeling about this and some of the questions, would we be able to possibly discuss a counter proposal next week? Or at least start hammering, start giving some visuals about what a full 5 or 6% raise would look like for this new move TIF to base.
Sure. Yeah, but I think what I'd like, again, you don't need to say this now. If you want to caucus, I still have time. We can do that, or it could be part of a Monday email. Is the PECTA proposal still as based on the information that shared today?
I think we'd like to probably take a look. So if we get this information that you have, and then Janice sends us like the breakdown that she has, and then we can just make sure that it aligns with, what we get that's submitted to the state. And if there isn't any alignment, we could ask any questions about it. I think then we'd have a better way to answer that question. I don't know if we can answer that yet. Of
course.
We're not going to solve it in a caucus right now. So I think
I'm gonna play the new to meet and confer card here just to gain understanding. I guess I'm like, there was an offer put out. What's the process? Like, so you want us to provide a different offer in order for you to provide a counter? Like, couldn't you still provide a counter and then we caucus about your counter as to what we're going to accept? I'm just confused and playing the newbie card here to understand the process.
Yep.
That could be one of the things that we do. Absolutely. Again, when we do that, we're really in that space of negotiation. I'm a fan of collaboration. And so if, PECTA is not interested in doing that and says, no, we're still sticking with our proposal as written 6%. The reason I'm asking that is that what I'm sharing with you right now is very different, I think, than the set of information we had when that proposal was made. So I'm extending the
Opportunity.
the opportunity and the grace of just saying, like, let me just make sure that's still what we want to do. And then I have a better sense, for me and for Janice, we're directors. We're not chiefs. We're not assistant soups. We are not soups. We're not governing boards. So we're really trying to hear all the voices that we can and thinking about what's going to be best for everybody. And so I would want that clarification from your all's voice.
I'd like to take the opportunity, and the answer might be we come back and say 6%. I mean, that very well may be, but if there are different numbers than what we use to calculate our ask, because we did use numbers to calculate our ask, I would want for us to be in a position where we're advocating for what we think is doable and to be able to show like where the money could come from. So I think having those numbers from Janice would be very helpful for us to be able to go back and look, and it might still be that we are asking for the same thing, but I do want to look.
So I know that our standard is Mondays at 3, but for this, I will check with Janice see if we can have it to tomorrow by 3, so that way you get even more time with it. For this document, I'm pretty sure I could just turn it into a PDF and send it to you pretty immediately. I don't know if my phone's going to light up right now from people watching saying, no, it's not ready yet, but it's pretty close, and I'm pretty sure there's a screenshot of it available somewhere. So I'll get this document over to you ASAP, and I'll see if Janice can get that to you by Friday, so that way you just get more time with it.
All right. If there are no more questions about this, I'd just like to bring this up before we end this. So I believe it's important to give credit to the amazing educators and staff of our district. First of all, thank you so much to the incredible classified support staff that are ensuring our families have lunch. They are our frontline workers, and I hope when we all come back, we as a district will find a way to honor this service that they have been providing. Second, I want to give a special thank you to the educators Manny Blanco, Aaron Fricks, Jay Barbudo, Leonor Gomez, Melody Vanderveen, Angela Peterson, Andy Ruth, Kelly Wright, Stacy Grady, Sam Mason, for passing out 300 boxes of food from St. Mary's to our community the past 2 Wednesdays. You guys are incredible educators, and what an asset this district has. So thank you to all of you. On that note, if there are no more questions, it is 4:37. Thank you so much to everyone for staying on a little longer to hammer out these important details. And we will send all the necessaries by Monday, and have a good draft. Hopefully everyone's fun.
Sorry, Joe, can we just take a minute, make sure that we all understand what we need to have Fridays and Mondays so that there's no ambiguity about that? And I'm sorry, I feel like I do this every meeting and everybody's like, no, we're finally get out of here. But I want to just make sure we're clear. On Monday, you're going to send to us an idea and possibly a form about Prop 301. And on Monday, we're going to send to you the back end of how Prop 301 is going to work. I just put into the chat the way that PRG works, but I'll also include that in the email on Monday, so you have that information. And then as far as the salary increase proposal is concerned, as early as tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow, but definitely by Monday, you'll get the budget breakdown from Janice that includes questions about ADM and weighted student count, and the teacher experience index. And then you'll get the document from me that I shared on my screen earlier today. At the same time, on Monday at 3:30, you'll give me a sense of where you all are at. And if you're not at the place you want to be at Monday at 3:30, you need some more time, that's totally fine too, so that we can set the agenda, which will come back Tuesday at 3:30. Did I miss anything in next steps, or are we good there?
All right. Well, everyone have a wonderful weekend.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Hey, Anthony, I hope the Bills just have a terrible draft.
What a guy. What a guy.
Hey, I understand. We had a, so I'll just give you a quick, Bruce Smith was